garden is still full of colour. It's still looking fantastic, even though we're a good chunk through November. But I'm actually going to dig it all up. Here's the thing. This is probably the kind of video you never see online, because it's about getting rid of perfectly lovely colour and these plants that are still alive, and it is going to seem completely counterintuitive. But apparently we have an Arctic blast coming, and many gardeners actually garden as a hobby, and we have full-time jobs and other commitments that take our time. So we can't always wait until these moments happen. I can't wait until the Arctic blast hits on Monday and Tuesday and then deal with things, because I'll be at work. So we have to do it this weekend because this is when we've got time. And it's a bit sad, and nobody likes taking all the glorious colour out of their garden. But I do this so that I've got all the gorgeous colour next year again. And we're going to see if we can just put little bits of colour back in. And bonus, we'll finally get to plant the last of our spring bulbs, because I've still got a box load. So that's the plan for today. So it's easy to start here. A couple of my dahlias in the pots in front of the greenhouse. These, I'll put the name on the screen because I can never remember it, but they're Glory. Basically, we call them Glory, and they are glorious. We love them. Hence, they go here because they give us a big, beautiful display that we see from the house all the time. So it's for our benefit. As you can see though, they're quite open. They get hit with the wind. They're in pots, so they really suffer from rain and lack of rain. So they're the first ones to look a bit poorly. Now here's the big question. Do you have to lift your dahlias over winter? And the answer is no, absolutely you do not, okay? It depends on your situation. I do, and it's because our winters, well in fact our autumns, our winters and our spring are very wet. We get so much rain. We don't get a lot of snow here, and our temperatures aren't as cold as people think. We get a lot of rain. And unfortunately tuberous plants tend to rot in the ground. So we lift them and we store them over winter so that they're nice and safe, and I can plant them again in spring. You might not have to because it might not be as wet. What you can do instead is cut your dahlias right back and then mulch over them to protect them. And what you're going to see when I cut these down, the stems on dahlias are hollow. So it lets moisture and what have you in, and that affects the tuber. So what you do is you cut down to the soil level and you mulch over the top to cover those little stems that are left. Me, however, I'm going to dig them up. Now the reason I talk about the frost and how it affects your dahlias is because these do go dormant over winter. So when they're hit by that hard frost and it blackens the leaves, it signals the plants to go dormant. Now they haven't had that yet, so you can see it's still trying to grow. There's still greenery. I can see all these little buds on the bottom. That's going to stop when I dig it up. It's going to send it into dormancy. Now the main thing when you're doing this to be careful of is dahlias are tuberous, and I'm going to show you that when I dig it out. It means they've got the big bulbous roots under the soil, almost looks like potatoes, but those are really important and you don't want to damage them. That's where all of the plant's energy is to get it going again next year. So what I'm doing, because it's a pot, it's quite difficult. These pots have a lip, so I can't just bring the plant out easily. So what I'm doing is I'm loosening up all the soil round about, but I'm doing it incredibly carefully. So you're going to see roots, like here, just like normal roots, but we're going to have these big bulbous tubers as well. So there we go. It's out of the ground, and you can see all of these roots, and in here you can see, remember I said it looks a bit like potatoes? Because potatoes are a tuber. That's them there. Now what I need to do is get as much of this soil or this compost out of here, but very carefully. I'm going to put it down. One of the things that I know worries people is it seems like such a faff to grow dahlias and look after dahlias. Now the thing is, it isn't. It probably seems like that because when we do videos, all the people who do videos and talk about this online, we're having to be incredibly careful to make sure we give you information that's important. So it maybe feels like we're overemphasising and maybe kind of really focusing on, oh, be careful, this is dangerous, that type of thing. But it's just to make sure we get the info across. Actually, it's not a big drama at all. Like I said, it was harder to dig it out of this pot because of the style of pot. And all I'm doing now is going around and getting the soil out. Now, I'm talking about being careful. I'm just saying that because I don't want you to go in with a knife or something sharp and scratch up the tubers. So when I say be careful, I'm just meaning go in with your fingers and just loosen things up, just like you would any plant root ball. Okay. And we want to get as much off as we can. Okay, now, I'm going to say that's one for now. So I'm going to put it there and put this soil back because I'm going to fill this pot with some winter colour later. Now, one very, very important step. If you're lifting your dahlia tubers, this is not to be forgotten, and it's this.
Put a label on it.
I have these labels. Now, you can use any kind of labels. I've got these and they're quite handy because I can wrap them around the tubers or the stems and leave them attached like that. So they're quite handy. And before anyone asks, there is a link in the description to all the videos that takes you to our Amazon shop where we get all this stuff. So these three are my Glory dahlias. So, Glory. And then you can see here I've got some stems that I've left. So I will put that on the stem. And when I store them, the label stays on there. Dahlias are lifted and you'll see there's lots of different sizes here. Some of them are dwarf dahlias, really nice small plants, and some are our big things like our glories. But we also have other plants here. These are chocolate cosmos. They're not strictly a cosmos, but you can see they also have little tuberous growths. And these are going to get stored over winter the same way and brought out of dormancy in spring. So everything is labelled. I've cleaned everything up the best I can. That's the thing. Get as much of all that compost or the soil or whatever off as you can. Because the next step is we're going to store them away for winter. And before we do that, we need to get them nice and dry. Because if we store them when they're damp, that's when you risk mould and rot. So what we're going to do next is we're going to put them away somewhere that's cool, dry, and it's going to protect them from things like frost and freeze. So if you've got a garage, it could be in there. We store them in the attic. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to store them for a couple of weeks upside down like this to just try and get them to dry out as much as I can. I mentioned before that these stems are hollow, so we're going to store them upside down, and that's going to let as much of the moisture that's in the plant be released. And then, once that happens, you just put them away. Now, there's lots of ways you can do that. I've done it wrapped in newspaper, and that's kind of a traditional way. Wrap them all up so each of these plants is a separate plant, separated from all the others. And then you can put them away, you can put them in boxes to store them, whatever. Don't put them in plastic bags. You want to make sure there's air and that it's not going to hold in any moisture. Last year, I stored them in a big box full of vermiculite, and that was fantastic. That was my best season ever. Whatever you do, you just want to make sure they're kept nice and dry, but you're going to have to check on them a few times over winter to make sure that there's no mould or rot setting in. And if you find that, discard anything that's rotten or mouldy and just keep it away from all the others. And then come spring, we'll wake these up again. Well, we're day 2 now, and it did get very cold last night. We got down to 0 degrees. It was 0 degrees when I got up this morning, and there was a touch of frost. Now, we're talking a light frost, so it wasn't enough to actually kill anything, but boy did we notice the difference in temperature. So I'm glad we made a start yesterday. But today we're focusing on putting a little bit of colour back so that we just don't have all these blank spaces. Now, we did get the bulbs finally planted yesterday. Let's see.
And these have been split.
Yeah, they've been split. They're enormous. Globemaster alliums. Have fun, honey. The last of the bulbs are in, which means now we can plant on top. And it's winter colour, so you know it's going to be the usual things you see in my garden all the time. We've got violas, we've got primula, we've got all sorts, heuchera, but some other things as well. Because there's more about winter colour than just flowers. To the greenhouse. So of course, we took a little trip to our favourite garden store, which is actually our local nursery, with the purpose of getting some plants for some colour to just add back into all of these spaces. So remember that video from a few years ago?
That we're going for
Hanging baskets.
And we bought trees.
Yeah.
Whose fault was that?
Yours. Look, don't you skulk away and pretend you'd nothing to do with this.
You chose the trees.
And these are those very trees. So, as Kate said, they're a type of holly, but it wasn't so much the holly and the winter and those associations that got us. I've always liked this tall, taupey-reed kind of lollipop style, but this has this amazing variegated foliage, and what that means is these leaves that have multiple colours on them. So they've got the different greens and yellows, and you'll see this a lot in our garden. It's one of the ways that we make sure there is always interest in colour, even through winter, is we have a lot of evergreen shrubbery around, and if we can, we get the ones that have this really interesting foliage. So I'm quite chuffed to have a couple of these that I'm going to put here. Now, this is where things get really cool because you've got choices. We've got these trees in pots. Excellent. We can buy them and plant them up now because they're grown in pots. That's fabulous. But what that also means is I have a choice. I can bury these as they are in the pot, like actually in their own plastic pot, and I can plant around to hide that it's in the pot, and we get, boom, instant visual appeal and winter colour. Or if I decide I want to change up and I'm not going to grow my dahlias in these pots next year, I can actually plant these and make these the permanent feature at the front of the greenhouse, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm not going to put the dahlias back here for next year. We'll put them somewhere else in the garden, and I'm going to have these trees here, but I'm also going to have a little bit of colour of greenery around the bottom just to add a little bit of interest over the bleak winter months. So let's get these planted then. So what I've got then, obviously I've had the dahlias grown in here all year, so they've taken a lot of the nutrition, if not all of it, out of the compost mix that was in this pot. So I'm going to have to replace at least some of it to put some of that nutrition back. So I've emptied it down to about halfway, and I've got some nice new stuff here that I'm going to put in. Now what I'm also going to put in is a few handfuls of this fish blood and bone, just where the roots are going to go, because that's going to help with nutrition. Because here's the thing, you guys see me do an awful lot of potting on in the greenhouse when it's small plants, and those things aren't intended to be in those pots for any longer than a few months. So I never add anything extra to it. I don't add in any extra nutrition. But when you've got a plant that's going to be out permanently, if you like, in a pot or a container, it is going to use up any of the nutrition that's there. So you are going to have to think about how you replenish that. So each season you can take maybe 3 inches of the compost off of the top and add fresh compost. You can add in things like fish blood and bone to the mix to improve it there. And if it's something that fruits or flowers, throughout the course of the year, you can be giving it liquid feeds when you water it as well. So these are all the things to think about. So I've added in some fish blood and bone, and I've got some lovely fresh compost here. So I'm going to add in some of this, just a bit just now, to top it up, and then I need to gauge my heights. Now what you can see on the floor here as well is some other plants. So I mentioned I'm going to plant around it. I've got some of this gorgeous blue-green grass. It's just amazing. It's called intense blue. And I've got some of these little heuchera. Okay, so this is the coral forest one. You can see the difference in size. I am not going to be able to plant lots of things this size and the tree in here. It's just not big enough. But it's cheaper for me to buy these big plants and divide them than to buy lots and lots of tiny little ones like I got these in the bargain bin. So that's the plan. I just got a couple of these, and I could probably divide that up and get a couple of small plants in here. Much cheaper. But let's start with the trees. So here we go. I need to judge my height. So I need a hole in the middle for this, for the root ball. Because that's the thing, I don't want to be planting this any deeper than it's already in the pot. So I'm going to knock that pot off, and there we go. Now it's not horrendously root bound, but I'm just going to break these up. And breaking these roots means it will then push roots out, new roots, going looking for fresh nutrition, fresh water. There we go. So it doesn't have to be a lot, just a bit. There we go. Now, this is topiary, so that is the front. And there we go. Make sure that's in. Now, I'm on my own, so let's see if it's straight. Normally I'd shout Kate for this bit. And you lot aren't much use. Tweak that slightly. And I'm going to fill it in. Same again, we just tease out those roots a little bit. And I think I'm going to do a bit of grass on either side. There we go. One done. Now, these are perennials, so they will grow, obviously, so it's nice and small just now, fit in there, but they won't be permanently in there, because it's not really a great idea to have too many plants in one pot, especially something this size. So these will probably come out and be replaced at some point, possibly next winter, by smaller plants after I've refreshed the soil. But I'm going to get this tree done, and then I'll meet you over at Dahlia. There we go. Some nice new plant. Okay, to Dahlia. HMS Dahlia. Normally full of dahlias and other plants, but quite bare now. And it's a big visual point for us, and this is the thing. Our garden's all about us, because it's our garden. So it's what do we see from the window here? What do we see when we're out doing stuff in the garden, from a kitchen window, that kind of stuff? And we don't want to look at a bare planter until the spring bulbs come up, and then until summer. Because a lot of the year in Scotland, it's quite cool and quite wet. So it's not really until the end of May that the garden really gets going. So we're going to put some planting on the top to give us some colour, but it is full of spring bulbs. So I want to make sure I do the planting in a way that those bulbs can come up throughout spring, because we have lasagna planted this like everywhere else, and the bulbs will be coming up right through spring. But at the same time, if it's just the bulbs, it can look a bit bare, a bit strange. So I want to plant it up, and I've got some choices. So for us, there are some staples that you can use throughout winter. So number one, I've got some primrose. These were some of the first plants we ever planted in this garden. They're all over the place and they're still going. Fabulous perennials, and they just do great. They look lovely over the colder months, even right through into sort of the early part of spring. They're still going, and they're the main pop of colour. So I've got some of these, and of course we've got heaps of viola. Hanging baskets, planters, beds, everything. These are the versatile little guy, and again, right through winter and beyond. Again, we've got viola in this garden that have been here for years and years and years. So there's going to be a lot of these. This is Bellis. Now, you've already seen these in the garden. We got these last year, and I know some of you guys are massive fans. Gorgeous little guys that will give us lovely pops of colour. Bellis. Now, we just said about primrose, polyanthus. I always just call them all primrose, same sort of thing. But these have these little drumsticks. See up, the flowers go up high. Stunning. But again, there is actually a lot of choice for UK gardens over the winter month. So I can't wait. As you can see my breath, which means the freeze came. So we got down to minus figures. So it was minus figures this morning, first thing. Yeah, it's very cold. But we got heaps done this weekend. We got all the dahlias lifted. So those tubers are away safe in a nice dry place, drying out before they'll get stored for winter. We got lots of the tender plants lifted, and I've tried to save as many as I possibly could. All our bulbs have now been planted. We've got little pops of colour replacing things like the dahlias, so the garden's not bare. And we've got a few things around that are going to give us that evergreen colour. So I think that was a successful weekend. We didn't get as much done as we'd hoped because I twanged my back. So we had to stop. But as you can see, I've still got lots of plants to go out. Things like the Tower of Flower, there's tenders in there that are going to have to be replaced with some of these. But overall, happy. Now, I do have a wee announcement for you. It's something to prick up your ears and listen, because it's important. For some of you guys, you have been round with us on this channel for a very long time. Yes, a very long time. And I've been putting out videos on a regular schedule for almost all of it. Whew. It's been a long time. That's a lot of work. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to give myself a bit of a well-earned rest over the winter period. A wee treat for me. So I'm still going to make videos, but I'm not going to be putting them out on the regular schedule like I have been doing for the past 8 years. Instead, I'll just be posting videos here and there as I've got something to share with you guys. So it means you're not going to be able to rely on me in my regular scheduled time. Instead, guys, and I haven't said this in a very long time, so some of you may not realise, but if you hit the subscribe button and that little bell and choose all for notifications, it means you'll get an alert every time I do post a video, so you won't miss out on anything. It's the best way to follow on for just now while I'm not doing the regular schedule. So hit the subscribe button and the little bell and choose all, and hopefully then you won't miss anything that comes out if I have some exciting stuff for you over winter. So I'll say, it's a bit chilly and I'm going to go indoors for just now. See you folks.